Welcome to Truthsful Crime Case, where we explore the hidden and often disturbing sides of human relationships, revealing the shocking crimes they can sometimes lead to. In today's episode, we unravel the tragic story of a forbidden affair between a grandmother and her step-grandson, which spiraled into a horrific murder. Jett Robertson was only 18 when his life was tragically taken. Jett was a senior at Bridgerton High School, located in the peaceful suburb of Bridgerton, Missouri, near St. Louis. He had a passion for bicycles, often spending his spare time either working on them in his garage or cruising around town. Jett was the type of young man who was always eager to help others, whether it was repairing a neighbor's flat tire or volunteering at community events like the Bridgerton Fall Festival. He was also known for his laid-back and friendly nature. Jett was the kind of friend you could always rely on to keep your secrets or lift your spirits with a laugh when times were tough. Earlier that year, his life was shaken by the sudden death of his father, who passed away from a heart attack. The loss left a deep void in Jett's life, one that no one seemed able to fill. During this challenging time, Jett found comfort in his step-grandmother, Nancy Robertson McClure. Nancy had always played a significant role in his life, having helped raise him after his mother, Tora, left the family when Jett was just 14. With his mother gone and his father now passed away, Jett leaned on Nancy for the emotional support he desperately needed. Jett always knew he could count on her. She was there to listen and offer a comforting hug, helping him feel less alone. Jett dreamed of leaving Bridgerton after graduation. He often spoke about moving to the bustling Kansas City, where he hoped to find work as a bicycle mechanic and eventually open his own shop. His friends and teachers saw him as a dedicated and promising individual. He had even been saving for a trip to Chicago, a dream he had cherished since childhood. In the days leading up to his death, Jett was focused on his future, eager to leave his small-town life behind. He was also gearing up for Halloween, excited to dress as Nancy from Stranger Things, one of his favorite shows. Yet, hidden beneath this excitement was a dark secret that no one could have foreseen, a secret that would tragically lead to his untimely death. On the morning of October 28, 2020, Bridgerton awoke to a crisp fall day, with pumpkins adorning doorsteps and political signs lining the streets as the contentious 2020 election approached. Around 8 a.m., Kevin Robertson, Jett's stepfather, made a startling discovery. Kevin was about to leave for his construction job but noticed something unusual about Jett's morning routine. Jett hadn't come inside for breakfast, which was out of character since he usually rose early and spent time in the garage before school. When Kevin went to check on him, he found the garage door slightly open. Inside, he was met with a horrifying sight: Jett's lifeless body sprawled on the cold concrete floor. The teenager's head was bloodied, and next to him lay the wrench, once a trusted tool but now stained with blood. Kevin's heart raced as he stood frozen, struggling to comprehend the scene before him. The initial shock swiftly gave way to panic. Kevin dashed inside the house, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. His voice trembled with panic as he described the horrifying scene in the garage to the operator. His reaction was one of utter terror. He could hardly believe what he had just found. Kevin paced anxiously in the driveway, glancing up and down the street as if wishing it were all a nightmare. Within minutes, the Bridgerton Police Department arrived at the scene. Officers swiftly secured the area, marking off the garage and driveway as neighbors began to gather, both curious and concerned. The news of Jett's death spread rapidly through the close-knit community. Many residents, who had been engrossed in politically charged election coverage, were stunned to learn about the tragic event unfolding right down the street. As paramedics arrived and confirmed Jett's death, Kevin sat on the curb in disbelief, his head in his hands, repeatedly asking, "Why would someone do this?" While officers tried to calm him, the small suburban town of Bridgerton, known for its coincidental name with the popular Netflix series, was suddenly thrust into a nightmare that would reveal more darkness than anyone could have anticipated. The Bridgerton Police Department responded swiftly, arriving at the Robertson home around 8:15 a.m. on October 28, 2020. Officer James Delgado, a 12-year veteran of the force, led the team, renowned for his calm demeanor and sharp investigative skills. Delgado had encountered many crime scenes but had never faced anything like this in the otherwise peaceful town of Bridgerton. The garage where Jett's body was found was a small, cluttered space filled with the typical tools and gadgets of an 18-year-old passionate about working on bicycles. The scene was eerily quiet, interrupted only by the distant hum of a lawnmower and the chirping of birds. The concrete floor, normally dusty and littered with bike parts, was now stained by a pool of dark, dried blood. Beside Jett's body lay the wrench, a heavy tool from his own toolbox, its size and weight indicating it was used to bludgeon him to death. As Officer Delgado and his team started their investigation, they carefully documented the scene. They took photographs from every angle to capture the blood splatter on the floor and walls, the position of Jett's body, and the wrench used in the attack. The police carefully collected the wrench as evidence, noting the bloodstains and looking for any potential fingerprints. They also gathered samples from the blood pool and other traces that might help identify the killer. The crime scene presented a disturbing contrast, clean yet brutal. There were no signs of a struggle, indicating that Jett had likely been caught off guard. The tidy condition of the garage made the violent act even more jarring. The team meticulously searched for clues, footprints, fibers, or anything unusual that might point to the perpetrator. As the investigation progressed, Delgado couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random act of violence. The use of Jett's own tool as the murder weapon hinted at a close relationship between the victim and the killer. With no signs of forced entry or robbery, the police believed that Jett's killer was someone he knew well, someone who had likely been in the garage with him before things turned violent. By the end of the day, the crime scene had been thoroughly examined, but the mystery was just beginning to unfold. The next step was to question those closest to Jett. As the police began piecing together the events leading to the murder, their first focus was on Nancy Robertson McClear, Jett's 74-year-old step-grandmother. Nancy was a familiar figure in Bridgerton, known for her long career as a retired schoolteacher who had spent decades educating the town's children. With her silver hair and gentle smile, Nancy seemed to embody the image of a sweet, nurturing grandmother. However, the police couldn't overlook the rumors about her unusually close relationship with Jett, which had raised concerns among those who knew the family. After Jett's father's sudden death, Nancy had partially raised him, and while they had grown close over the years, their relationship was more complex than it initially appeared. The police soon discovered that Nancy and Jett had been involved in a secret sexual relationship, a revelation that shocked even the most experienced investigators. This new information cast Nancy in a different light and made her a primary suspect in the murder. During questioning, Nancy was initially cooperative. She appeared calm, seated in her cozy living room surrounded by family photos and the faint scent of vanilla candles. Nancy spoke warmly of Jett, describing him as a loving grandson who had been a source of comfort for her after her husband's death. However, as the questions became more direct, her demeanor started to change. Nancy grew more defensive, giving shorter and less detailed answers. When asked about her whereabouts on the morning of October 28th, she claimed she had been at home, preparing for a quiet day of reading and knitting. Despite her calm demeanor, the police observed her trembling hands and the nervous glances she cast around the room. When pressed about her relationship with Jett, Nancy denied any wrongdoing, but the investigators remained skeptical. The wrench used in the murder came from Jett's own toolbox, indicating that the killer had access to his personal belongings and knew him well enough to be in his private space without arousing suspicion. As the investigation continued, Nancy's potential motive started to come into focus. It seemed that Jett had recently attempted to end their sexual relationship, possibly due to guilt or fear of being discovered. This rejection might have driven Nancy to commit the unthinkable. The prospect of losing Jett, combined with the potential exposure of their secret, could have pushed her to a breaking point. As the police concluded their initial questioning, Nancy remained a key person of interest. Her calm demeanor, once reassuring, now seemed like a facade concealing deeper emotions that might have driven her to murder the person she claimed to love. Next, the police turned their attention to Kevin Robertson, Jett's 46-year-old stepfather, as their second suspect. Kevin, a construction foreman, was known in Bridgerton for his tough, no-nonsense demeanor. With his gruff exterior and typically worn Carhartt jacket and steel-toed boots, he was a man of few words who preferred to let his work speak for itself. Having spent years in the construction business building homes and managing crews, Kevin had always had a strained relationship with Jett. Their tense dynamic was well known in town, particularly following the death of Jett's father. Kevin had tried to step in as a father figure, but Jett never fully accepted him. They often clashed, and their arguments were frequently audible through the thin walls of their modest suburban home. When the police questioned Kevin, he remained surprisingly calm. Seated at the kitchen table, his large hands resting on the worn wood, Kevin answered the police's questions without hesitation. He acknowledged the troubled relationship with Jett, but denied any involvement in his stepson's death. Kevin explained that on the morning of October 28th, he had been working on a construction site across town, overseeing a crew on a project to build a new wing at the local high school. He even provided the names of his co-workers as alibis to support his claim. However, as the questioning progressed, a startlingly different side of Kevin began to emerge, revealing a surprising secret that the police uncovered. Kevin led a secret double life as a drag queen and Adele impersonator, performing under the stage name Adele Dazeem. This revelation shocked the small, conservative town of Bridgerton, where such a lifestyle was far from the norm and often viewed negatively. Kevin's hidden identity raised questions about how much of his life he had concealed from his family, including Jett. Despite this surprising twist, the police found no direct evidence linking Kevin to the murder. His co-workers confirmed his alibi, and there were no indications that he was involved in the crime. However, the revelation of his secret life added a new layer of complexity to the case, prompting investigators to question whether there was more to Kevin's story than initially apparent. Kevin's motive for potentially wanting Jett out of the picture remained unclear, but his history of violent outbursts and the strained relationship with Jett kept him under suspicion. As the investigation progressed, detectives continued to closely monitor Kevin's every move. The police then turned their attention to Brielle Cantera, Jett's 38-year-old estranged mother, as their third suspect. Brielle had a troubled past that was well known in Bridgerton. A former stripper who had struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction, she spent much of Jett's childhood in and out of rehab. Her life was marked by mental illness and several arrests. Brielle's reputation in town was far from stable, and many had written her off as a lost cause. After abandoning Jett during his teenage years, she had recently attempted to reconnect with him. In October 2020, Brielle had returned to Springfield, a nearby city, and was living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Jett, still harboring resentment from her abandonment, was reluctant to let Brielle back into his life. Their relationship remained strained, with only occasional contact. However, Brielle was determined to make amends and had been reaching out to Jett more frequently in the days leading up to his death. When the police brought Brielle in for questioning, she appeared nervous and anxious. Dressed in a worn-out hoodie and jeans, she fidgeted in the interrogation room, her eyes darting around as she responded to the detective's questions. Brielle denied any involvement in Jett's murder, insisting that she had only wanted to reconnect with her son and had no reason to harm him. She claimed that on the morning of October 28th, she was attending a local AA meeting, which she regularly attended to maintain her sobriety. The meeting was held at a church basement in Springfield, about 200 miles away. Despite her alibi, detectives remained suspicious, feeling that Brielle might be concealing something. Brielle's past behavior and unstable mental state made her a significant person of interest. The police questioned her extensively about her whereabouts and interactions with Jett in the days leading up to his death. Despite their probing, Brielle consistently maintained her innocence, insisting that she had no involvement in the murder and was only trying to improve her relationship with her son. The police remained skeptical. Brielle's history of erratic behavior and her recent attempts to reconnect with Jett raised questions about her true motives. Were her efforts to make amends genuine, or was there something more sinister behind them? Detectives continued to investigate her past, searching for any clues that might connect her to the crime. In the end, while Brielle's troubled history and strained relationship with Jett made her a prime suspect, no concrete evidence directly linked her to the murder. The investigation into her involvement remained open, as the police continued to search for any overlooked details that might provide the answers they needed. On November 1, 2020, just days before Halloween and the contentious presidential election, Bridgerton, Missouri, experienced a cold front with cloudy skies and a brisk wind, prompting residents to bundle up in their favorite hoodies and jackets. On this chilly afternoon, a crucial piece of new evidence was uncovered, dramatically shifting the investigation into Jett Robertson's murder. Detective Mark Travis, leading the case, decided to revisit Jett's garage, suspecting that something might have been missed. While sifting through the cluttered space, he discovered an old wooden toolbox pushed into a corner. Inside the toolbox, buried beneath a pile of rusty tools, Detective Travis found a small, leather-bound notebook. The worn notebook was filled with Jett's neat handwriting, recording various thoughts and observations. As Travis flipped through the pages, he came across something that immediately caught his attention. Among the notes about bike repairs and homework assignments, Detective Travis found entries revealing Jett's growing suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClure, his step-grandmother and secret lover. The entries detailed how Jett had discovered troubling information about the mysterious death of Nancy's third husband, Charles McClure, who had died under strange circumstances in 1995. Jett had uncovered that Charles' death, initially ruled an accident, had always troubled him. Inside the notebook, Detective Travis found old newspaper clippings and records suggesting foul play in Charles McClure's death. Notably, there was an insurance policy that Nancy had cashed out shortly after his passing. The entries revealed that Jett had confronted Nancy about his suspicions and had threatened to expose their secret sexual relationship if she didn't end it and let him move on with his life. This discovery was a significant breakthrough in the case. With this new evidence, the police had a clear motive for why Nancy might have wanted Jett silenced. Fearing that he would expose her involvement in Charles McClure's death, a case that had been quietly buried for years, Nancy had a strong incentive to keep him quiet. Detective Travis immediately recognized the significance of the notebook and ordered a thorough review of Charles McClure's death, suspecting that Nancy might have a history of eliminating those who threatened to reveal her secrets. The notebook also shed light on Nancy's increasingly erratic behavior leading up to Jett's murder. It depicted a woman desperate to protect her secrets at any cost. With this new evidence, the police grew more certain that Nancy Robertson McClure was not only involved in Jett's death, but had committed a cold, calculated act to prevent him from exposing her past. As the investigation progressed, the police were ready to confront Nancy with the new, incriminating evidence, bringing them closer to solving Jett's tragic death. On the morning of November 3, 2020, amidst the excitement of the presidential election, the town of Bridgerton, Missouri, was abuzz with election chatter. However, the local police were focused on a different mission. Armed with the new evidence from Jett Robertson's notebook, Detective Mark Travis and his team were confident they had identified the murderer. The entries in the notebook revealed Jett's suspicions about Nancy Robertson McClure's involvement in the mysterious death of her third husband, Charles McClure, in 1995. This provided a strong motive for Nancy to silence Jett. The police meticulously reviewed the evidence, reconstructing the sequence of events. The police believed that Nancy, driven by her obsessive love for Jett and fear of being exposed, had lured him into the garage on the night of his murder. In a desperate moment, she seized a heavy wrench from his toolbox, the very tool Jett used daily, and bludgeoned him to death. This brutal act ensured that Jett would never reveal her secrets. With this theory in mind, Detective Travis secured an arrest warrant for Nancy Robertson McClure. While much of the town was preoccupied with Election Day, the police took action. They arrived at Nancy's tidy home in Bridgerton, where she had been living alone since Charles' death. When the officers knocked on the door, Nancy answered with a calm and composed demeanor. As the police read her the charges, Nancy's calm demeanor quickly shifted to one of shock and panic. The evidence against her seemed overwhelming. She protested her innocence vehemently, insisting that she loved Jett and could never have harmed him. The detectives remained resolute, confident in the strength of their evidence. Nancy was handcuffed and led out of her home, with a few neighbors watching from the street, intrigued by the police activity. The news of her arrest quickly spread through Bridgerton, leaving the tight-knit community stunned. The arrest of Nancy shocked many in Bridgerton, who struggled to reconcile the image of the kind, elderly woman they knew with the reality of the crime. For Jett's family, who had been mourning his loss, the arrest provided a glimmer of hope. While it couldn't undo the tragedy, it was a step toward seeking justice for their loved one. The investigation into Jett Robertson's death had revealed a complex web of deceit and forbidden relationships. With Nancy Robertson McClure charged, the next chapter began her trial. Starting in December 2020, shortly after the contentious presidential election, the trial became a major focus in Bridgerton. The local media, including the Bridgerton Gazette, closely followed and reported on each development. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michelle Harmon, presented a compelling case against Nancy Robertson McClure. They focused on the key evidence from Jett's notebook, which revealed Nancy's involvement in her third husband Charles McClure's suspicious death. Harmon argued that this evidence provided a clear motive for Nancy's murder of Jett, highlighting the depth of her desperation to protect her dark secrets. The prosecution detailed how Jett had threatened to expose Nancy's dark secrets. They presented a narrative of how, overwhelmed by fear and obsession, Nancy had lured Jett into the garage and used a wrench from his toolbox to murder him. The evidence, including Jett's notebook and the brutal nature of the crime, painted a picture of a desperate woman driven to violence to protect her secrets. The wrench, a tool Jett used regularly for his bike repairs, symbolized Nancy's desperate attempt to permanently silence him. The prosecution's argument was straightforward. Nancy had planned and carried out the murder to protect her hidden past. The defense, led by Robert Timmons, a 54-year-old experienced attorney known for handling challenging cases, presented a contrasting argument. They portrayed Nancy as a frail, elderly woman incapable of such violence. They contended that another perpetrator might be responsible and claimed Nancy was being unjustly accused due to her close relationship with Jett. Timmons attempted to undermine the credibility of the notebook entries, arguing that they were the ramblings of a troubled teenager rather than reliable evidence. The trial was emotionally intense, with Jett's family, including his estranged mother, Brielle, present throughout. Their anguish was evident as they listened to the harrowing details of Jett's final moments, adding a poignant layer to the courtroom drama. The jury, however, was not convinced by the defense's arguments. After several days of deliberation, they returned with a verdict of guilty. Nancy Robertson McClure was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would face the consequences of her actions for the rest of her life. The verdict brought a mix of relief and disbelief to the community. Jett's family felt a sense of justice, knowing that Nancy would face the consequences for her actions. However, many in Bridgerton, who had once admired Nancy as a cherished teacher and neighbor, were stunned by the turn of events. The trial served as a sobering reminder of the hidden darkness that can lie beneath even the most respected facades. In the aftermath, life in Bridgerton gradually returned to its usual rhythm, though the chilling memory of the murder continued to cast a long shadow over the town. The town, already under strain from the pandemic and the heated 2020 election, was deeply unsettled by the trial's revelations. Residents who had once seen Nancy as a cherished figure found it difficult to reconcile their memories of her with the harsh reality of her crimes. For Jett Robertson's family, moving forward was a challenge. The profound loss of their son and the traumatic details surrounding his death left enduring emotional wounds, making it difficult to find closure and healing in the wake of such a brutal tragedy. Brielle Cantora was overwhelmed by guilt and sorrow. Her recent efforts to reconnect with Jett, hoping to mend their fractured relationship, had been tragically cut short. Now, she faced the profound grief of mourning a future she would never have with her son. The weight of her past mistakes and the lost chance to rebuild their bond added to her anguish, leaving her to grapple with the harsh reality of Jett's death and the missed opportunity for reconciliation. Brielle went back to Springfield and resumed her nursing job, but the weight of the tragedy was hard to bear. To cope, she turned to therapy and support groups, finding comfort in connecting with others who had faced similar grief. Meanwhile, Kevin Robertson, Jett's stepfather, struggled to accept the harsh reality about his own mother. Kevin had always felt uneasy about Nancy's closeness with Jett, but he never expected it to end in such a horrifying way. After the trial, Kevin decided to take a break from his job as a construction foreman to focus on his family. He made it a priority to be there for his children, trying to mend the emotional scars the tragedy had left behind. Kevin chose to leave Bridgerton, hoping to rebuild his life in a new place where the memories of the past wouldn't follow him. For the people of Bridgerton, Jett Robertson's murder became a cautionary tale, a story told to remind children that even in a small, close-knit town, danger can hide where it's least expected. The case would forever mark a dark chapter in Bridgerton's history, a grim reminder that those who seem trustworthy can sometimes carry the darkest secrets. A Truthsful Crime Case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case, or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.